Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. The book Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, came out in 2020, followed by Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, followed by Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children as a bestseller, followed by Raised by These Wolves, Volume 2, Child Trafficking Through the Foster Care and Court Systems, came out July 17th as a bestseller. And I have two return guests on. I'm happy to have Nate Munro and Debbie Carroll on. They were last on season 5, episode 167 in October 6th of 2024, where we talked about exposing corrupt policies. Now, we're going to talk about what happens to parents who are trapped in family court cases with judges who conduct illegal and unethical practices against them. Where can they go for help? Are there solutions outside the legal system? What does it take to have influence in the decisions made in the administrative courtrooms? Nate Munro and Debbie Carroll will be tackling these questions in their effort to identify and create avenues for parents suffering the often capricious actions of judges, magistrates, and attorneys who work in the divorce, custody, and child welfare industries. Parents going through the courts feel paralyzed, isolated, and terribly uninformed. They don't know the legal process, and they especially don't expect the legal maneuvers that will be used against them. Parents hope to be able to trust their own attorneys, but they quickly find out that attorneys have playbooks they follow with little regard for the pain and suffering of their clients, which often brings on a lot of health problems, not only to the parents, but their children. I welcome you, Nate Munro and Debbie Carroll. I'm glad you're back.
Thanks
Hi,
for having
good to
us.
see you.
Great to see you. We have a lot to cover.
We sure do.
Yeah.
Nate, did you want to start with the story that you were talking about?
Sure,
Probably
I can
nice.
totally start with that. Um, we were going to start talking about all of the different varieties of corruption in the state of Colorado right at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And these part of the problem that parents often run up against is the propaganda tool that the government uses in all of these matters. They cover up most of these things so they never make it to the mainstream media. In fact, there's a definite push and a concerted effort by the establishment to make sure that these cases never make daylight so they don't have to face accountability for any of this. This is part of the qualified immunity argument, right? Because like the government's always right about things and they don't want to be shown that they're wrong. And this goes back to some of the mental illness that I think just is pervasive within the entire county structure, and it proceeds on up into the state oversight all the way up to the top levels of government, at least here in Colorado, but I assume it's similar in many other states. I myself have documented systemic problems with the Department of Human Services in 10 counties in Colorado, and Debbie's probably seen more than that. She's at least seen the ones I've seen and then more too. So it's like there's 64 counties in Colorado, and I would imagine it's an issue in all of them. In fact,
I've been
we've
in
heard
Washington County, which is out northeast, and I've been in Garfield County, where Glenwood Spring is. I've been in Mesa County, and I think there's another one, but we bring the banner everywhere we go, so they know we're coming.
Mm-hmm.
The banner that says Family Court and CPS kidnap children.
but they don't listen though, is the other problem, right, Debbie?
Well, they're usually you do get the shock impact for the first time we show up, and they're very nervous, and they have the deputies in the courtrooms and stuff. But you know, we're lawful people, and we are fighting for a just cause. So it's hard for them to do
The
too much.
problem
Pueblo
really,
County. I've been to
oh,
Pueblo
sorry,
County
Debbie.
many times.
The problem is though is they're very aware and intentionally doing these things. This is not like oops, this happened or
Mhm.
whatever. This is an oops, we got caught. Almost always with all of these,
It's
they're all
lockstep.
doing it.
It's
Yeah, and it's so
lockstep.
systemic. It's like the same learning curve that we went through with police reform in this country, where we're at the beginning, they're like, it's a few bad apples. And then you're like, well, no, it's a toxic system. It's a toxic work culture that's going on. And the same thing happens in any department of the state where they have qualified immunity, similar to the same reason why the police ended up with that same attitude and then all the problems that come along with it when there's no accountability, because you can't get rid of the bad apples, and the bad apples are just shuffled around within the rest of the culture to some other place. So they're playing like that 3-card Monty shell game where they're like, keep your eye on the queen, if you know what I mean, and you got to watch the ball underneath the cup. And
Right.
like,
And
that's the game they play with the bad ones. They just move them around.
they
Same.
blame the
And
parents. They
right.
they challenge their credibility. That is the number one weapon that is used in the courts. And you've seen it in, that they try and make the person out to be a criminal. In fact, they literally try to make them a criminal by following up on accusations by the other party or by the lawyers for the other party. They literally try to denigrate a person in order to diminish the judge's reliability on your credibility. And because of the preponderance of evidence standard in these courts, that is the lowest standard. It means 51% chance it happened the way that it's being depicted. So a judge only has to believe 1% over a coin toss. That's it. That's what that standard means. And without juries, only the judge is the one who makes that determination. And so a lot rides on the judges. And we're going to be focusing on that in our conversation today about the different forms of how to look at where to get relief, where to get acknowledgement, where to get pressure and have the influence and be able to get change. Most generally, it's exposure, public shaming of the people involved in the cases, just because of the decisions that they make and how heinous they are and how undercover they all are and acceptable, unless there's, we were told in Lisa Mitchell's case that because her son didn't die in El Pueblo residential treatment, she really didn't have much of a case. It's just like a probable cause. They have to have evidence of the crime before they're going to do anything about it. And the worse it is, the better, like your chances of getting help.
Well, and Debbie, many times once the person is dead, they look at, okay, so there's no crime then because they aren't surviving to collect the benefits.
The victim can't testify.
Right. Then the crime goes away with the body. So
that's where dead men tell no tales.
Yeah. And to reflect on one point that Debbie was making there, the way to actually fix this legally, if we had a system that worked, would be jury trials within the family court systems. We've been told that by an attorney who used to work for the state, who was trained by their internal systems. He was disgusted by the way they work and he doesn't work with them anymore. But he said the answer to this is jury trials in the family court would stop a lot of this judicial corruption. Because the problem is the judges often are working in concert with the crooked legal staff, the GALs, which is guardian ad litem. These are attorneys that work for the children, and they take the state's position over the parents or the families, and they're used to remove the kids. Normally, the judges in the case or the magistrates will take whatever the GAL says 100% at face value, regardless if it's true or not. They don't look into it at all. They just take it at whatever face value.
That's very true.
It makes them incredibly dangerous.
Even when a CPS caseworker is on the stand and perjuring themselves left and right, the judge will take whatever they're saying and just roll with that.
I found out over this last weekend, helping another client out with a long motion to stop a warrant for her arrest. The Jamie Logan case, actually, you featured on your podcast before. We found out in her case that the codes of conduct apply to lawyers and judges, but not actual law. They aren't actually subject to perjury charges. And that's why they do that, because once again, qualified immunity. And if the only thing is a code breach, then you have to go through their own system of of accountability within each one of these departments, and they're all rigged and all corrupt. So like they've compromised every way to go and place a complaint. And so it makes it very difficult for anybody. You'll do exactly what they say that you're supposed to do on the website or whatever. And they've just made sure that all the paths to having any type of grievance voiced is compromised. And because of that, it makes it incredibly difficult. The parents end up being gaslit more because they think they're doing something, they're doing the best, and the judge is going to get his or hers just as soon as this motion comes in or whatever. And it's because they're lawless, basically, and all of the oversight's been compromised. So right now, go ahead, Debbie.
I was just looking up. So one of the things we want to make it very clear for people, if most of the people been through it, know what we're saying is real and how it happens. But other people don't understand how it could possibly happen. There is a video out that that was showing Judge Bain. I think it was in Arizona. I just looked it up. I can't find it. They scrub these things all the time. Once we get hold of them, they get scrubbed. And I'm not real technologically savvy, and I didn't know at the time to download it. But Judge Bain was literally teaching the caseworkers and the judges. So they have these meetings. It's the AFCC, the American Family Court Conciliation Council. And they go up to Vail and they have these great big parties, and they're up there and they're teaching each other how to do things. But this was a video inside the county where the judge was talking about that the county judges need to be the ones who file for the adoption incentive monies and the incentives, because if it's filed at the state, the county never gets the money. And it literally they're training, it's an actual training of the judges to make sure that the counties get the money over the state getting the money at the county level. So they're competing with the state for the federal funds. They're literally competing. And so what that means in action is that the statement that I wrote about the playbook, there is a playbook they're constantly refining. And as the laws change and the federal funding changes and the requirements and the incentives all change, they all get tuned up on how to maintain it. So that what that does is it builds that toxic culture, and it brings new people in, and everybody sees this is how it's supposed to happen. And they will, the credibility of the parent is nothing compared to the power of the machinery, the power of the organism that they've created that is overriding it. So with that in mind, I think that we should move into looking at the specific case of Danielle Jurinsky. So you want to talk about
Yes,
that, Nate?
that's what I wanted to do. I'm going to share my screen really quick here. Well, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to see how fast it is. And let me get over here to, we'll be right back to that one. Should have pulled this up first.
What Nate is going to show you is an affidavit that was written by Robin Nicetta. She was accused of she was a caseworker, a former Arapahoe County social worker. And she, in defense of herself, kind of blew the whistle. She blew the whistle to spread the blame among her coworkers and the judges in the case. So go ahead, Nate.
Okay, so this basically outlines these three ladies. We've got Robin Nicetta, who was the corrupt caseworker in question. We have her her lover, Vanessa Wilson, who was at the time the Arapahoe County Sheriff.
No, the City of Aurora.
City of Aurora Sheriff. Okay, but she was the sheriff in the locale where it's happening. Robin Nicetta was a caseworker with the Department of Human Services in Arapahoe County, which is where Aurora is.
They were
Hmm.
living
Oh, they were
together.
living together also? I didn't know that
Convenient.
detail, but they worked in cahoots with each other to basically file a false report. Robin Niceta filed the false report against Danielle Jurinsky, who's a sitting city councilwoman in the city of Aurora. So this is bringing up the point. Here's somebody who's tremendously connected within the city of Aurora, and
Mhm.
these corrupt fools decided to go ahead and attack her anyways. And if they can attack her, they can do anything they want to little people. In fact, that's the whole deal. Daniel Jurinsky ended up representing 30 families total in a class action lawsuit to take down Robin Niceta. And they recently were awarded the money. It was appealed, and then they were granted it anyways. Part of the kicker about this whole thing is Robin Niceta in court argued that she had a brain tumor that wouldn't allow her to stand trial or face prosecution. And it was found out later during the trial that her medical records were fraudulent. The whole thing was made up. And so she got busted for that in the middle of all the rest of this. And we should bring up the original charges against Robin Niceta was for her sexually for being a sexual predator with their clients, asking for an underage girl who was one of her clients to send her indecent photos. That was the case, right, Debbie?
The part that I'm aware of, I wasn't aware of that one. But the part was that she was propositioning the moms
Mm.
for sex, or she was going to take the children from them.
I know there was an issue with pictures coming from a minor too, because it's mentioned in some of the articles.
Now,
Okay.
who wrote
So
this?
this is by 9 News.
Okay.
I don't know if we can call them reputable, but it was by 9 News.
Mark Salinger.
There's supposedly, there's supposed to be an authoritative news source. Okay, so I want to play this video really quickly, hopefully. Just the first few seconds of it.
You got the volume there?
Firsthand. I mean, you feel powerless when it comes to your children and this looming thought that
Can't
your
hear it very
child's
well.
gonna be taken from you.
The state begin.
Okay, so were you guys able to hear the volume on that?
No,
I heard it.
I didn't hear it till the very last 5 seconds.
Oh, they didn't have much volume until then.
Okay.
But this was Danielle Jurinsky, the sitting city councilwoman, saying you feel completely powerless when they're coming after you to take your kids. If she, as a city councilwoman, says that, and that's her opening statement, you can imagine how awful this is for anyone else trying to just brave this all on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So this article here was written in on September 26, 2022. So it's several years old, but it took a while for them to catch up with their karma. And so the important part I want to bring up about this is this statement that Arapahoe County made. Now, this is before the fraud and all the rest of this was found out. They were thinking they were still going to get away with something. So when the charges came in, Arapahoe County said it's going to add new measures to stop, quote, bad actors from infiltrating the system in the future, end quote, when it's working so great. Now, I don't have more follow-up on Arapahoe County specifically, but we've had other parents who have anecdotally said that that's not the case already. And Debbie and I have witnessed this in multiple counties. This is not like specific or unique to Arapahoe County at all. This is typical of the entire state. So to deal with all these issues, Arapahoe County issued this statement, and this is probably going to make Debbie laugh at some point because it's ridiculous. But feel free to chime in with comments if you have them at any point. Arapahoe County is thankful that the state's limited review of Robin Niceta's cases concluded that no children are currently in an unsafe situation, which is consistent with the mission of Arapahoe County Department of Human Services. And the mission for, I'm not familiar with the specific mission for Arapahoe County, but all of them are some feel-good line that they don't ever hit the mark on. Like the departments, the Colorado Department of Human Services, their motto is, we're the people who help people.
Mm.
And then they also have another one. We're the ones who help people thrive, and thrive in quotes there. And they also have a failure to thrive. So they'll like tell a parent, like, you're not allowing your parent to thrive. Let us get involved. And then they just destroy everything, right? All the family
Okay.
bonds and up and down. Go ahead, Debbie.
I just wanted, while you have it on the screen, they conducted a limited review, and
Thank
that's
you.
enough. And what happens with the limited review is they don't open any other cases by the same caseworker, and unless they're forced to. So we have that exact same thing going on in another case in Larimer County. And once they decide an outcome for the one case, they don't go back and relook at what that caseworker did to the other families or the children in the other families.
In general, they don't go back and help any of the families that they've hurt after they've discovered, oops, we made an oopsie. They don't go back and help the families. They just leave them to deal with whatever broken system they're in. Maybe missing an arm, right? That kind of stuff. They're
Mm.
really good like that.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
They'll come into your house and set your living room furniture on fire and then leave. And
right.
you deal with
Blame
it.
you for having an open fire in your house.
Yeah.
that's
Well,
the thing.
yeah,
Okay, so Debbie had a great point about this being the state's limited review right there. So right there, they're saying this is an internal investigation and it was limited at that, meaning
that's
it's,
how I sarcastically laugh at it, right?
yeah,
What
absolutely.
an effing joke that is.
Right, right. So in light of these findings and consistent with statewide recommendations to all counties, we will add measures that will help mitigate the likelihood of bad actors infiltrating these systems in the future, which absolutely didn't happen. It didn't happen in any of the other counties. In fact, we'll get into it later. The state ombudsman's office has other issues that have popped up. They don't do much about them, but they've collected these other issues to show that that's a complete falsehood, or at least even if they meant it at the time, they abjectly failed on every level with that effort. And they also said, we will also add new quality assurance professionals to help guide these practice improvements. And that, have you ever met a quality assurance professional, Debbie? Ever even heard of one outside of what I'm saying now?
Actually, I was one, but it was in the printing industry, not
In Department of Human Services. Other
no.
industries don't count.
But what I do want to point out is, like, what did it take for there to become justice? So apparently there were other people, up to 30 other people whom this one caseworker had worked with. And that has to be over time. That's not just like in 30 days or 30 weeks. It's more than 30 months,
And
I
I
mean,
believe it was 30 families. I think it was 30 participants in the class action. So there could have been multiple kids in each one of those groups, actually.
right. So that could be up to 100 kids that are being affected by this caseworker. But
One
it
caseworker,
took,
too.
it took something that triggered the media involvement. That's the piece that we need to pay attention to. Going through the system, going to the ombudsman, oh, they minimize it. Going to the county, they don't want to hear it. They'll lose your complaint. They make excuses. They use it against you, actually, if you complain. They report to the judge that you're making complaints about the county, and you're, the judge will get mad at you and tell you, you better not be on Facebook. You better not be talking about this. So they do everything they can to contain the news. So the number one solution is to go beyond before you get caught. If you're good, before you get caught going on Facebook, you have everything you need to put on there, because once you start it in piecemeal fashion, they'll stop you. They'll put a gag order on you. They have the power to gag you in a family court case. And even if they don't use that power, they just threaten it, you've already lost that important credibility factor.
And it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, it's a code violation for the judge's professional conduct as well. That they're not allowed to do this, but they still do it, obviously. So we'll continue on here with the county statement. The county requested this outside review to determine whether there was any additional misconduct committed by the former employee, like maybe lying on the stand and saying she has a brain tumor.
Yeah.
I just kept
That's
going and
unfair.
going. And this is the problem with a pathological person. They're patterned and they can't stop. It's beyond their control pretty much. That's why it's a personality disorder. And
Mhm.
that's why I revert back to that point. Most of these people suffer from the institutional psychopathic groupthink, where it's just like it's part of the institution and expected that anybody that joins, you have to join the cult basically too and act appropriate or they'll get your mind right.
Mhm.
So the audit conducted by the State Department of Human Services determined that on some cases handled by the former employee, there was a failure to completely investigate and document potential cases of child abuse, although it did not result in any child being left in an unsafe situation. This is absolute crap when you're talking, she was a sexual predator using her position as a caseworker to exploit the kids that she's working with.
Mhm.
And the parents too, I'm imagining now. It's like, and she's abusing her position of power to attack sitting council people. I mean, it's out of control.
Mhm.
It also concluded that the former employee's supervision did not catch these instances and recommended further review of supervisory practices. That, Debbie, have you ever heard of that actually happening in the world? These are nice words they're playing, but like I've never seen this.
Well, it's the foxes guarding the hen house. What
Right.
do they do? What do they do? Have a meeting at the local bar and talk about what they were going to do so
Let's
they
get it.
get caught?
1 second, Debbie. You're stealing my thunder when we get to the written admission part of this. But some might say yes. But and remember, these are honest foxes guarding the hen house, right? That's what
But
we
if
all
it
got to keep in mind. These foxes are honest. They don't act like foxes at all. They don't eat
if
chickens.
it requires bringing more people into the case so they can get
Right.
more federal dollars, yes, they do conduct the investigation.
Fair
If
enough.
it's
Fair enough.
meaningful in any way or result in any meaningful improvement for the children in the long run, I highly doubt that happens.
So the good news at the end, this is a feel-good story because fortunately, no additional instances of false reporting against a third party by this former employee have been found. And see how all the legal loopholes in that statement?
Only
Nora is
33.
right. Beyond the 30 other people that are coming with the class action, but then this is only one employee in that entire system doing this, and her supervisor. Okay, nor has anything been found that would support the allegations of widespread overzealous and false pursuance of child abuse allegations contained in the recently filed class action suit. So they're saying the class action suit is horse crap, should be taken care of quite soon in the court of law. Well, the problem is they were found guilty. And so let me see if I can get this guy.
Well, they
Oh my
minimize the charges down to, 1 or 2. And we have that Sandra Spraker in Larimer County that had 99 felony counts and they limited it down to 2. She was a caseworker in Larimer County. So that's another, if you want to look that one up, Sandra Spraker, Spraker. That case started with 99 felony counts. And there were 10 families involved.
99 felony counts. How does
Yeah.
this happen?
I had this up, but it minimized it again.
It happens because it's
other
the
page going up.
culture and they don't change anything until they get caught. So that's the point, that if you're in the family court, the juvenile courts, and you just go along, I am not an attorney, but I tell every parent, do not sign the dependency and neglect form. Don't be tricked into signing it. Do not, because you have just said, come in and take my kids. You've opened the door. You unlocked it, opened it, and you've welcomed them into the house, into the home. So this is the affidavit. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, they're like vampires basically. Once they're in your home, it's over. Like you invite them in and it's done. Okay, so this is the written admission by Robin Nacetta after she was busted for not having a brain tumor and having to deal with the chickens coming home to roost. Okay, so the part I want to flag people
hang
to right at
hang
the
on.
beginning is this. Oh, go ahead, Debbie.
This is the team that handled all sexual abuse trafficking cases that would come from intake to permanency. So right there, they've got sexual abuse trafficking and trafficking cases that they're supposed to be looking for the safest place to put the children. And if it is with one or both parents or a grandmother, whatever, that is the likelihood of them ending up is variable in every county, but it's very low. It's not like 90%. Sometimes with all of the scrutiny, it might be 40% or the outcome is good. But we have a report published in October 2023 that it's 84% failure rate across the country is the average failure rate. Meaning that the outcome from the children was not the best placement. What this is also showing is that Ms. Niceta was working with established groups and teams, and that they all were aware of her wonderful record for removing children from parents. That's what they care about.
Right, and this is actually getting into the mechanics of it, Debbie. So we'll flag one more point up here at the top. During this time, Robin Niceta worked with this lady, Marika Quinn, on the SART team. So this is not just the regular folks that are in there. These are all the parents and families that have been dealing with sexual assault, raping,
Response team.
and trafficking. Oh, is it response team?
Yeah.
But it's the sexual assaults and trafficking unit specifically. So these are people that have already been traumatized severely, and that's the ones that they're actually being predatory with here within the county.
Who are the two people that have been traumatized?
Oh, all the other cases, all the class action suit victims.
Okay.
Right? But Marika is a critical part of this because she runs that unit. Okay. So it says down here, Robin often worked with guardian ad litems or GALs, Sarah Yarbrough and Allison Bettenberg. So she was also socially acquainted with both. They would take certain caseworkers to lavish dinners at Shanahan's. That's an upscale restaurant downtown, but it's a bar too.
Named after Coach Shanahan of the Denver Broncos.
Right. Oh. But you're right. As far as I know, he's not necessarily knowingly linked with any of this. That's just where they met. But they would throw parties at their office and only invite the caseworkers that they felt were aligned in their views of how the child welfare system should operate. So that is them forming the way the toxic culture behaves and creating the toxic culture outside of the office, basically. But there's a planning committee.
Keep going. They were motivated to keep the cases. Keep going. You're doing great.
Okay, thank you. So Sarah and Allison were motivated to keep the cases open longer. These are the two GALs, as this would generate more money for the firm. And this is a very common practice with all the state-run attorneys, whether they come from the Office of Respondent Parents Counsel, which is the ORPC, is the one that provides parents who have no money with an attorney. So when they do that, this is just an attorney that helps shuttle them through the whole system, like how a plea bargain would work with like the DA or something in a system where you're getting prosecuted in criminal court. Marika and Sarah were close friends. So this is the lady who runs the SART unit, and Sarah, the GAL. We're close friends. Marika only wanted to work with Sarah because they could make the cases go the way they felt, even if the parents were truly making progress on their treatment plans. So this is super important because even if the parents are doing everything completely right, the state is working with this racketeering ring to throw them under the bus. It was well known that the system was set up to assign certain GALs. So that's the last we want to hear out of the state coming back and saying this is not a systemic problem. Right here, they're saying it is well known that the system was set up to do this exact operation. to assign certain GALs at specific dates and times, so to get a preferred GAL.
Well,
And what
hang
they
on.
mean by that is, okay,
That means that they are so well entrenched that they can schedule a certain case with a certain caseworker, and that takes precedence to get those dates in time over all of the other things that they're doing, all the other cases. That is absolutely incriminating of the system, and the judges are involved in that. They know it as well. They
so
know that
Debbie, on that point, this is okay. It's not just an arbitrary thing. They will set a date now. This is what this allows them also to schedule this. And also, if there was, say, a good apple in that situation, and they're like, well, dang it, we really want those kids, they will remove the good apple and put in a flunky to take the place and have a crony do their bidding. So that's what, there's a lot in there to unpack. Did you have any other points, Debbie?
no, keep going.
Okay.
So then, wait a
Sarah,
minute.
the GAL, would brag that she was untouchable and laughed off complaints filed against her at the Office of Child Representatives who govern GALs. So this Office of Child Representatives is like the ORPC. Oh, do you have a question, Marianne?
Yeah, so what you're saying is they have the power, these two women, just to get rid of a guardian ad litem who's doing their job.
Yes, and more or less an obligation to maintain the toxic culture, right? Because it'll spring a hole in their whole plan if somebody worthwhile or accountable gets in there. So it's very important to remove all those people first.
And that,
So
look at the name of that, Office of the Child Representative. So one of the points of our whole presentation is, where do you go when you need help? So the Office of Child Representative is run by the state Supreme Court. It is the building is in their offices, and they pay the guardians ad litem. So the paychecks for guardians ad litem who are state appointed come from the Supreme Court building, from the office there, and it's funded by the fund that finances the court. I mean, you got the ORPC, the Office of Respondent Parent Counsel, being investigated by another agency that's also paid by the same group, which are both paid by the Supreme Court.
and just to make one note about the Colorado Supreme Court, they made the news earlier this year by being the group that was taking Trump off the ballot. And I'm not a Trump supporter, but I still think that everybody should have a right to be able to be on the ballot. And it was obviously thrown out now that he's president, but like that should show that the corruption goes from the bottom to the top. There's not any break in it. It's like just consistent
Very
from
true.
the county all the way up to the top levels of oversight. So the one, there's two more points I want to make on this, and then we'll go back to just talking about things in general. This point down here, Jamie Pruitt, our supervisor. So this is Robin Nacetta's supervisor, would have us go back in and alter notes if she felt like they needed more. This is saying if DHS, Department of Human Services, needed more to incriminate a parent, or if the notes didn't match the direction the case was headed. So they're determining the direction the case is headed with this. And they're saying if it didn't match that, they're going to come back and fix it, because there's the supervisor to make sure they're quality controlled.
Yeah, the fix is in.
Well, I think I want to read the next one. For example, in KA's case, there's an entry from Sunday, June 30th, 2019, showing an in-person team meeting at the department office. That's on a Sunday. The subject was a sexual abuse.
What's wrong with that, Debbie?
Oh, well, we think they don't work on the weekends. Like the parents work 24
These are very
hours a day.
dedicated state employees that come in on the weekends.
I think that they didn't want anyone else knowing what they were doing. The subject was a sexual abuse outcry against the father that was made on videotape at the department by one of KA's daughters, and a referral was made. The outcry was not accepted for assessment. The meeting notes show that I was in attendance. This is false. I was not in attendance at that meeting.
See, county workers don't work on Sundays.
Right. No, I know
Mine did.
Special treatment.
Well, this was like an ex parte hearing, and who knows who
Right.
else was there. But let me just point something out. This is an associated case with Robin Nicetta, and it's the one where we talked about it on the last program. it was the one that KA is the wife of a very rich fracking founder. And the girl is out crying against her dad. So the dad uses the fact that the outcry was not accepted for assessment and sues the mother for defamation. After this case is over, he sues the mother for defamation, and he gets a $20 million award against the ex-wife based on a claim made by the child that was not investigated. It was marked as unfounded. It went away. And the child's making an outcry, and the mother is begging for her child. And the department that's in charge, the SART team, the sexual abuse response team, doesn't investigate it. So this affidavit has put the judgment against the mother at huge issue. This is caused ripples throughout the court system here, because the court system here just gets away with whatever it wants and names things what it wants to name them. And the reason the case was thrown out by the Supreme Court of the United States on the Trump ballot issue is that they never presented a definition of an insurrection. So,
well, this is the issue, Debbie. Like normally, like the judges are doing whatever they want to. There isn't a legal basis behind any of their decisions. Normally, it's how they feel about a person or what they're paid to do if they're on the take.
They have so much control over a case and the disposition of a case and the path, the direction it's supposed to go. It's all planned in advance. They sit around and talk about it. So,
and the financial incentives are there, so they all are inspired to build on this system.
Robin Niceta is trying to excuse herself from liability for that $20 million defamation award. You see, that I wasn't even there.
Debbie, I've got to push back and be extra skeptical because the county already gave their public statement that said there were no other children being harmed in the county. So like, I don't know how this came up, but this obviously can't be true. This is her own admission. So yeah, obviously that was sarcastic for any of the listeners.
So go ahead, because now we come to the judges.
Right. Yeah. This is where it really gets good. So I'm going to skip a little bit of this and go down to the punchline. Judge Natalie Chase would host happy hours to meet. So this is them drinking while they're figuring out these cool policies too, which is obviously even better. Okay. So would host these happy hours to meet with caseworkers and the GALs. The county leadership would push us, meaning Robin and her cohorts, to attend these. So this is the county leadership, the people sitting with Danielle Jurinsky on the city council, other people up, the county commissioners. Like that's what this is saying. So this is saying all the way to the top in the county administration is corrupt also, at least certain players. We can't say all of them, but there's at least some cited here. Judge Chase would discuss cases with caseworkers outside the court proceedings, which I'm not specifically certain about this, but the way it's written here sounds like that's against code, and I'm pretty certain it is against judicial code just in general. But I'm not aware of the specific code it broke, but I'm pretty certain it does.
Those are ex parte hearings. Those are
absolutely. It would fall under ex parte communications and other things. But there's things that they're supposed to be honest and not be biased against one party or another. There's all kinds of code violations packed into this. So the caseworkers preferred being in front of Chase because the cases would go their way. Surprise, surprise, you get the crooked judge in there, all of a sudden things go your way. And they're all buddies. And caseworkers preferred being in front of Chase because the cases would go their way. The county attorney's office was aware of this practice. So there's the DAs and all the county, basically the county legal systems, all working in cahoots together as a systemic problem, just so Department of Human Services is aware of what they're actually saying. So on February 21st, 2000 something, they left off the last digit there. Tamara White sent me a text message acknowledging she knew I had been in Chase's chambers. So it's aware that this happens.
Okay.
Um,
Look at the last bullet.
okay, I was going to read the top one.
Yeah, that's the
second to top.
AFCC. That's the AFCC up in Vail. That's where they're.
Okay, so let
Okay.
me get this and then we'll close off with that one. Chase then, she showed up at the training that the county put on for caseworkers. So this is a corrupt judge showing up at the training to make sure they're all getting it right and their minds are right. For caseworkers, service providers. These are the other people that could be in there, like the PREs, the CFIs, PREs, parental responsibility evaluator, CFIs, child and family investigator, all those different folks, or the ORPC attorneys could be there maybe, and
Probably
the
the
GALs,
psychologists, the
psychologists. There's a whole slew of these folks that work with those courts, and had me discuss my case to the entire group. They're not supposed to divulge case details, even though that case was still pending. There she's getting into the specifics of the legalities of it. Robin did not believe this behavior stopped with Chase, though. For example, Sarah's wedding, one of the GALs, was officiated by Judge Slade, who I'm not familiar with Judge Slade yet, but I know she's not doing good if she's officiating these weddings and part of the rest of this, who had cases on her docket that Sarah was the GAL on. So this is them cohorting in private then again. They commonly talk, socialized, and discussed their personal lives. This was all commonplace in the courthouse and set up an adversarial, quote, us versus them, end quote, atmosphere. So the reason why you think they're being adversarial is because they are being adversarial, and it's the entire system. Here it is written in black and white. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share there.
Yes, and
go ahead, Debbie. I can tell you're holding it back.
well,
Let it loose.
so now they were throwing one of their own under the bus. So she's not going alone. And good for her. Good on her. If Robin Nicetta did anything right, she could become famous or appreciated for this 2-page document exposing how it works from the inside out.
I think it's going to take a little more for that for her to atone for the crimes that she did, hurting all those families. But it's a step in the right direction. I'll give you that one for sure.
Well, she's sitting in jail because they found her guilty of fraud for.
She deserves to.
Yeah, for the brain tumor thing.
Right, but why wasn't she held and put in jail for the rest of this? That's the problem. And then I'd like to go back to the point you made earlier about the Susan Spraker case in Larimer County.
Before you leave that one though, Danielle Durinsky says she'll never see a penny of the $3 million settlement that she won. She'll never see a penny of it. So Robin Nicetta lost a civil suit.
So what good is the law then? That's the question. Right. There's one where a class action suit went through. It was appealed by the county, and then this
was a separate one. They had a civil suit against her.
Okay, but even so, nobody is ultimately actually held accountable. Robin Nicetta is getting held accountable for lying and committing perjury with the fraud from changing medical records. I think probably because it was a federal crime probably at some point there.
Yeah.
But like they basically gave her skating rights on the rest of it. And the Susan Spraker case, there were 99 charges leveled against Susan Spraker in Larimer County for false reporting and embezzlement, maybe. She was doing all kinds of fraudulent behavior. I don't know if embezzlement was a specific crime, but she was fraudulently filing false reports and doing crooked stuff with the reporting.
I can look it up for you though.
Okay, that would be cool. But like there were 99 charges to start with. They ended up, I guess, plea bargaining them down to there's only 2 that are still on the books that they're actually pressing and going to prosecute her for. So she's basically getting off scot-free again, and she ruined many families' lives. This isn't like each one of these is like 30 to 100 people that they've caught them with, and then like they've worked with hundreds of families, if not thousands, throughout the entire department, right? Hundreds of thousands across the state. 1 out of 3 kids in Colorado is involved in either child support or the foster care system, somehow involved with human services. And so what it's doing ultimately, when you destroy all of these families and ruin these family bonds, they don't come back when they've been ruined. I've been alienated from my son now for over 7 years. So things, once they're ruined, it's very difficult to get them back, even if you're a responsible parent. And
Right.
during the part where I was taken out, I was labeled as the gold standard for parenting, and it didn't help me at all. I wasn't a city council person though, so I wasn't able to get the leverage because obviously they covered up my case completely. But Danielle Jurinsky at least had the bandwidth and the following to be able to make a stand about this. And the court of public opinion is basically the only functional court left in the country.
I found it. Let me pull it up. Screen share.
At some point, Debbie, maybe we should come back and do a detail on Larimer County, because the same month in which the Susan Spraker case went viral with the Denver Post and some of the other local news outlets, we had, with our own investigation through the Paladin Group, we had found that the sitting department director for the Department of Human Services, the program director, Heather O'Hare, or O'Hare, I'm not actually sure how you pronounce it. She was employee of the month, the same month that this was busted, the month before this was busted.
You
I
got
should say, but
it. She had embezzlement. Yep. So former caseworker, and it's not Suzanne, it's Sandra Spraker.
Sandra Spraker, thank you for
Yes.
correcting me on
Yes,
that.
I'm glad that we looked that up, because the lengthy criminal investigation and warrant was issued for, you know, you
Wow.
can see
Oh,
right there,
no.
29 counts of that. I think that was each case, or maybe that was each document. I don't know. But she forged records, official misconduct. I think she was found guilty on official misconduct and the theft. I don't know what I don't know.
The thing I'd like to say to just cap off my point before about Heather O'Hare up in Larimer County with this is Heather insisted, when we were having this debate with the case I was advocating for up there, that where we found her name up on the employee of the month board, they said, then they insisted, this is not a systemic issue. We've obviously taken care of it. We're getting ahead of it now. And then the next month, this comes out where there's 99 charges against another one of their caseworkers. So it's just, you can't take any of their words for anything.
So,
And then go
let's
ahead, Debbie.
let's just look at, you know, we've got 2 cases here. Both of these caseworkers have been caught. What worked and what didn't work?
Great.
So getting them into public awareness, you know, there's a likelihood that these women can go to a different state and become caseworkers again. They're not necessarily, unless that's part of the plea agreement or whatever, they could potentially go get jobs. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I
Mary?
mean, I heard they even changed their last names. I've had parents tell me that it was this name on this document, and then several months later, it's the first name with a different last name, but yet it's the same caseworker.
Yes, and
Judges.
we do
go ahead,
know
Debbie.
that Lisa Mitchell was finding that. She was really good at that, getting finding identity changes and stuff.
The
Go ahead.
judges we've seen, and the couple that we've seen get taken off the bench, they will oftentimes quit using their first name and use their middle name instead. So a very serious red flag for anybody with a judge is if you find a judge who lists like their first name as an initial and then go by their middle name and then their last name. That should be a huge red flag for you, and you should just start looking up judicial codes right at that point, because you can't have judges recuse themselves if they're being implicitly biased against you.
And that's another whole story about was it R. David Woods or Brett Brett David
Brett,
Woods.
see, there you go. He was Brett, but then he changed it to David.
He's gone. He was gone for watching porn at the courthouse. That's what they said, but he had a long history of alcoholism, and they hid it because he was a #1 producer in the juvenile courts for getting money to the state. Okay, so that is how they're judged. They keep them on until they can't possibly, and so what's going on with, I'm coming to talking about Amendment H here pretty soon, but I do want to make sure we revert back to what worked. So the publicity worked, getting the story into the hands of the news media worked, but there are other avenues that we have been bringing to bear. I just wanted
Debbie,
to
can
mention.
I jump in here really quick?
Go ahead.
One of the things that works really well that you don't need to be anybody special in order to do is just get all your friends and family to attend the hearing via WebEx or the live stream. Because what we found is crooked judges doing crooked things get kind of twitchy when there's a lot of witnesses. And if you have like 20 or so people pop up on the WebEx feed during the court hearing, they start acting different. And that is a huge benefit to the people in there. It doesn't always stop them from doing crooked things, but we just had one earlier this last month. It was since were on the podcast last, Marianne, we had a case actually that Debbie's probably going to recount at some point for this guy, Richard, where we had a bunch of court watchers show up, one of whom was a local journalist who has been documenting a lot of this and actually did a bunch of work on the Robin Nacetis story. His name popped up on the WebEx, and all of a sudden the court hearing was canceled in 2 minutes before it went live. But they had already collected the WebEx folks on it, so they weren't planning to cancel until something happened. We don't know exactly what it was, but the suspicion is it was the local reporter on the WebEx. So that could be a great way to help too. But like getting the word out and getting people to witness it is huge.
Right.
Yes, and we've been asked for Richard's next hearing. It was rescheduled for December 13th in Colorado Springs. So just to put the word out, it's Frost, it's the Frost case, and that one is so heinous that, I mean, Chris Osher of the Colorado's, darn, I gotta
He works
check.
for the Sun and the Gazette, and he sometimes gets posts in the Denver Post, I believe, as well.
Okay. Oh yeah, he came from the Denver Post. In fact, yeah, he was the one in 2014. He's the one that reported on the drug use of foster kids, the prescribed drugs that they were on, and he exposed that in a big way, and actually was very instrumental in getting El Pueblo Residential Treatment Center shut down. But okay, so
Debbie, can we just quickly overview the rest of the corrupt structures within Colorado, just so we can save people time from trying to report to them in general?
okay, or I mean, if you have to exhaust all of your, for an appeal, you have to exhaust all of your options, and if you don't report to them, so it's just their way of knowing that you're disgruntled, so they can send more caseworkers and have more happy hour discussions about your case. But
well, and improve the system then to take that into account for the next one. These are insidious people, like they are working on a system
at taxpayer expense.
Yeah,
of course. Why else would you do this? Right.
so go ahead.
That's just
which
one
other
more
government
okay, so I
agencies
just
are
as
we
a
gonna
word of
diss?
warning to the other parents in Colorado who are planning to go put complaints in. I myself filed 4 complaints with the county where I lost my arm, and I chased this whole thing all up through the state to like follow it every step of the way. So it goes up to the state oversight with the Department of Human Services to start with. They're completely worthless. They don't read complaints. I had 4 monthly meetings repeating with the policy and performance manager of child support services for all of Colorado. She never read any of the 4 complaints, even though we were having discussions every month, like, okay, so review those before the next one. And we did that 4 times until she bowed out. and gave me over to the department director of of child support services for the state. He then told me that they commit debt peonage on 40 or about 60% of the population. Any parents that make less than 40,000 a year are automatically made debt peons by the child support calculations. So then from there, and he didn't fix any of my problems, just admitted to more crimes that they do. And then from there, they referred me to the Child Support Review Committee, who listened to my grievances. I went on way longer than they were allowing me to get all of my points out there. They then said, well, you should probably talk to the legislature or whatever. And that they are supposedly the legal and legislative body to collect the information to take forward to the legislator to make improvements, which of course they have not done since. This is 3 years ago and they haven't done anything about any of these yet. And I was addressing all kinds of different grievances that were about the systemic issues, including the mental health issues within the departments. So that's up to there. It's important to know that that review committee is handpicked by the governor. So Governor Polis is involved with all of this as well. And he became personally involved with my case later. I brought a claim for injury for my arm forward to the Colorado Attorney General, who then sent my case. First of all, the people in his office used color of law to threaten me with laws that weren't even true. And then they conflated my advocacy work for some other parents that I found at a town hall put on by the Review Commission. And I was advocating for them. And to be fair with this, the Review Commission asked me to come back and be a parent advocate for one of their subcommittees. That's how I ended up at the town hall. Then I went and did that and became an advocate for two of the people. One was testifying in a garbage bag on the street because they'd made him homeless.
Oh.
And he was wearing the garbage bag to stay warm. And it was in November when this happened, late November, after Thanksgiving and before beginning of December. And then the other dad was stranded in Dubai, out of the whole country. And he's back now finally, but it wasn't from any action that the state really took. They were basically forced into doing that. And so, and that's where the governor's office was also involved with that case from Dubai, because I escalated that up to the governor's office. He's supposed to be the liaison to work with the federal government and the state government here in Colorado. We had U.S. Senators John Hickenlooper and Michael Bennet assisting us with this whole thing to try and get him back to be liaisons with the UAE government and the folks in Dubai. And they all, like, we've got an email from them that says that Governor Polis's office told Michael Bennett's office here in Colorado to not respond to any more of my emails because they were going to handle it. And what they did is just hand me off to the customer service department, who then, of all crazy things, misgendered me also, which is an amazing thing for an outed gay Republican, or he outed himself. I don't know how you say that, but a self-proclaimed gay governor to go out. He's not a Republican. If I just said that, I misspoke. He's Democratic, but he is gay. And then to do that with his own direction right afterwards, it's just ridiculous. The whole thing's just a joke in action all the way to the top. Now, there's a couple other options there for people to take cases through. We've got the ombudsman's office. They've got a special ombudsman just for child protection. And so it's the CPO, Child Protection Ombudsman. And there's also a mental health ombudsman's office that now has been defunded down till it's just one person. And so that's the other way they handle it. Here's an office with one person in it, been defunded till it doesn't even operate anymore. And they refuse to review any of the mental health points I'd made about their own staff, even though I documented it in 10 different counties. And then there's also the Colorado State Auditor's Office. So you can go to the Office of State Auditors, who gladly take your complaints and then do nothing with them. They release an audit report, which then just goes to the legislature and has them form study committees or something else that's completely ineffective. And Debbie, I'll hand it over to you for how the legislature works here.
Okay.
And I'll let you get into Amendment H.
I actually met Nate down at the state capitol. He was working on with parent rights, SB 110?
Yes.
We do a lot of public information by standing in front of the courthouses with summaries of cases.
Mhm.
I have developed some where we walk people through the steps of what happens in a CPS case, and then we show how it has happened in their case. So an example would be seven open visits or investigations of the family with no findings until the 8th one, where they come and they make a finding. And that's maintenance of efforts money. That's a special funding stream outside. It's out of Title 4E, but it's not direct payment for just the regular cases of children.
Does that mean they're using the Social Security monies for this?
Social Security funds this entire
Right.
racketeering, human trafficking travesty that is a foundational economic system of our government in the United States of America. And on that note, I will just mention that we have written to every president. We have every president throughout this whole, 15, close to 15 years now that I've been working on this. We usually don't get answers at all. Occasionally we'll get, sorry, thanks for your inquiry. We'll take it up if we'll take it up under advisement or whatever. Nothing. And we are hopeful that the only president I've ever heard of who's had the courts turn against him is Donald Trump. He has seen it from the other side, and pretty much feels he's a victim. He's become a victim of the courts because of many of the things that they've done, including going back on, creating laws that this would fall under, using laws that have never been used for this before, accepting a case that's 30 years old without proof.
Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
things that have
Debbie,
happened.
just on that note, slandering him, because that's the normal mode that the family courts use too, right? They slandered him as an insurrectionist. Once again, not a Trump supporter myself, but they are slandering him with a false story of the insurrection.
I don't believe Stormy Daniels' case ever had allegations of rape. But people believe that Donald Trump is a rapist. The E. Jean Carroll case was so old and that was never a report made. There's no physical evidence of anything whatsoever. And Donald Trump has been believed by many, many people without ever having one shred of evidence. So I think that piece of it has awakened something in Donald Trump. We can only hope and pray. I just want to say, I have posted on every single election that our elected officials are ignoring the damage to family court participants and CPS participants. And I can now add probate court participants because the administrative courts are getting away with murder and rape
and trafficking, human trafficking too,
and tearing families from their own members. Unbelievable that this can be happening in a country that we consider free. And so my prayer is that somebody who's been outside of the political party system for not a player and has become a player the first time, and maybe he's gonna use his knowledge of how to create change, and maybe that this is what his mission needs to be.
And it all starts with that silver bullet tactic. It happened to me. It happens to other mothers and fathers. once a false narrative gets going, you can't stop it. And people are so naive, they'll just believe whatever they hear. They don't bother to look at the other side of the coin.
Well,
We got into this a little bit last time. Just the whole point when you say, well, that mom's a crackhead. Most people won't look into that anymore. They'll just say, oh, she's got problems with drugs. She obviously deserves to have her kids just ripped away from her. Even if the mom is using drugs, it is a far better thing to put the mom in treatment for those drugs. And quite honestly, under the ADAAA, the Americans with Disabilities Act Amendments Act, substance abuse is considered a disability as long as you're in treatment. You don't need to be successful at your treatment, just be in treatment. So you can even fail UAs and have a hot UA, as long as you're in some sort of treatment for it, then it's covered under the ADAAA. And that's a common misconception that the courts use all the time to take kids away from parents, especially moms. And it's so bad because you break that child mother parenting and child relationship. I'm coming at this as a father's advocate. I'm not saying it's good to ruin dad's relationships either, but the mother-child relationship is the strongest love bond in all of nature. And I can be a father's rights advocate and still admit to that. So like it's incredibly important that we prevent this damage from happening, because once it's happened, it's all but impossible to fix like afterwards, especially when the kids are in foster care. Go ahead, Debbie.
I pray that is part of the healing. That is part of, can you imagine a parent who's been defamed in, by the judge, by the entire system, winning an $83 million settlement, or for a defamation settlement to some kind of, they're not gonna do that. Because they're responsible. The state is responsible for this.
Also, Debbie, it's probably not just the judge. It will be the judge, the DA, some GALs, then a CFI, and they'll all be working in with this common narrative, just like what we were talking about. They'd all talked about it at the bar. Now they're just doing it to your family when they get to back to work.
A lot of people lose their own parents through this. A lot
I
of
did.
The grandparents, because what happens is the department is what DHS CPS is called, the department, or the family court, the other attorney will go after the grandparent and say, if you want to see your grandchildren again, you need to help us get your grandchild away from your terrible daughter or your terrible son. And parents just feel the pressure. The grandparents just feel the pressure of it. It's hugely, it's such what matters more, relationships, family, nothing matters more than that to most people. If you have a drug addiction, that's a problem. If you're a criminal, that's serious. But for 90% of people, even their crimes are not. Let me just tell you this. I have been told by Brian Brinkerhoff, and he works for one of the agencies, that it is more damaging for a child to lose a father than it is to be sexually abused by that father. And
that's a note to all the moms out there that think they're doing something safe by taking the kid away from the dad. Like, the dads still have a role in the family. And in fact, dad deprived kids are at a much higher risk of suicide, especially after the ages of 12. And it increases all the way through their adolescence until they become young adults. And so it's incredibly important. And on that note, all parents out there should know the kids and parents involved in this system are 12 times as likely to commit suicide, to commit self-unaliving. Hopefully I caught that before you two did.
I mean,
it's all on the adverse childhood experiences score test.
The ACE studies.
Right.
Right.
You know
Well,
what's fun though, Marianne? When convenient, they will claim they don't even know what an ACE is. Because I had the director of child support services. I had to explain to him what an ACE score was. And you know dang well that that guy knew exactly what he was talking about. He was playing ignorant at the time.
Mm,
But if he was ignorant to it, he shouldn't have that position, because you should not be heading the whole state up for child support if you don't understand the metric used to gauge kids getting hurt by that same system.
mhm.
we have
That's
a
just the
judge,
level of idiocy that we're dealing with. Go ahead,
we
Debbie.
have, we have a judge, Keith Collins, who told a mom she's not allowed to mention the word sexual abuse by
Right.
the father in his courtroom. So, you know, the narrative, this is what people don't get. And I don't know if there's any help for it. They believe the narrative they're told. They believe the media they listen to. They believe their identity is this and this. It's really hard to get people. It's harder to change a person's mind than it is to change the course of a river.
Ugh.
And
Debbie, on that note, though, this is how they keep people being subservient to them, because the best way to keep slaves is to make them think they're not slaves.
Mhm.
well, the
And
other part of it is that while we have free speech, we have more opportunity to create any change that is going to happen, and any education. This is, to me, winning a precedent in court. People don't even know what's going on in the courts, and that's
Mm-mm.
when we're ready. I'm going to talk to you about what happened with Amendment H.
hey, yeah, I think Debbie, we're coming up to the end here. I think Amendment H, though, is totally worth
Oh,
making a little
yes.
extra time for. Go ahead and go into that, because this is a great example of how the state, if left to their own devices, will come up with a solution, quote unquote solution to these
Mhm.
horrible problems they know they've made
Oh.
intentionally. Go ahead, Debbie.
So I need to go back and explain that this whole thing started around 2019 or something. I don't know the exact date. But Mindy Macias, Masias, was working at the court. She worked in the Supreme Court building, and she was kind of an office manager. And she was there, and we know for sure that Chief Justice Nathan Coates was sexually harassing the women. I'm not sure if he is the judge that was walking around shirtless, touching himself. But this was
There's so many of them that do that.
yes.
Get them mixed
Yeah.
up.
You just see that in courthouse offices all the time. But
Hey, Debbie, on that note, one of the things that qualifies contempt in the state of Colorado is you offending the dignity of the court. And I want you to remember that as this guy's walking around shirtless,
Oh,
like
how dare you? How
hitting
dare
on
you?
people. Yeah,
right,
go ahead, Debbie.
right. And
Sorry.
the propriety, they must be, they must not commit impropriety. That means being proper. And so they hide behind it. And you had talked about the judicial ethics a little bit, and when you write these complaints about the different ethics that are violated. However, Mindy Macias and other people decided they were going to file a complaint against the judges. And they got wind of it. Someone got wind of it. And the Supreme Court decided among themselves that they were going to offer Miss Macias a contract. I believe it was to train judges on sexual harassment. $3 million contract to shut her up. But she turned them in for that too. And what happened was a huge scandal broke out. The Denver Post reported on it. I will say that. The Denver Post reported on it. Most people weren't paying attention. Most people aren't reading the newspaper. I don't think it was ever on the news, on television, about this. But they conducted an investigation. They hired an investigator who was trying to subpoena the court records, and the Supreme Court justices refused to honor the subpoena, which would have incriminated them. The findings of the investigatory group were that, yes, this did happen, that yes, there needed to be, they made recommendations, there needed to be change. There was a court administrator who helped hide things. His name got dragged through the mud. I can't remember right now. Anyway, so what they decided to do was to have interim committee, an interim committee conduct conduct interviews with people who had been involved in the scandal or who wanted to talk about what they thought would improve. And so I've been working with Christopher Forsyth. He's an attorney. He does, I think, Social Security law. But he was just fed up. And I'd say it's been about 10 years, 2014, he founded the Judicial Integrity Project. That man knows as much about the history of the Colorado courts, particularly the judicial review process. I've done some of my own investigation into the judicial. So there's a judicial review committee in every judicial district, and then there's one for the state. The ones for the state, I don't know at all levels, the governor appoints a lot of the members. They have attorneys, non-attorneys, citizens, and they have judges on the judge review commissions. I know for a fact that State Senator Leroy Garcia's wife was the latest appointee back when I was in the court. I was going to the legislature back in 2016 or so. But we had been exposing how many of the judges' wives were those non-attorney citizens on the Judicial Review Commission boards. So they totally infiltrated them with their own wives.
No.
And other very willing participants. So the result was that in the last 12 years, there've
Debbie,
only been
do
40
the wives share the same last names, or do they have different last names? Because I've just noticed that's a move that they do a lot when they.
Leroy Garcia's wife had the same last name.
Okay, but there's
And
many
she's
times
treated-
where they will purposefully not have the same last name, so it makes it even harder to catch these social connections that actually drive the whole corruption.
Well, she come down to the legislature and testify about how great the review commissions are.
Of course,
Right.
she's on it. They're great.
Yeah, yeah.
They're working perfect.
No problem.
No problems there. Yeah.
They held these interim committees. There were 4 meetings. I attended 3 of them. Chris Forsyth knows everything in and out. He knows about the different methods in other states about how judges are selected, elected, and so on. In Colorado, we have a selection by the governor process, but every 6 years, the judges come up for re-election. And so we try to get the word out about the bad judges before they're reelected, and we're getting better at it. So this is another method, this is an outside the judicial system that we're going to try and create change. And that's to name the judges that are, keeping sexual abuse allegations out of their courtrooms, for an example.
Mm-hmm.
But this interim committee, they were listening to a lot of people from family court. We had parents in tears testifying through WebEx and so on. The final result came out this year, and it was Proposition H that was submitted by the legislature to the ballot. And in it, they're asking for another adjudicative board. They already have an adjudicative board. They want another adjudicative board. And same thing, the governor's going to appoint them. It's going to be some judges. There's going to be a couple of judges. It's actually more money for us to pay for this committee to go on. So what I want to do is I want to share my screen with, so the blue book that we get, I don't know if that's in every state. You guys get blue books with the recommendations.
Informational book on the ballot, basically.
Yeah, I would think. I haven't had time to look.
Right.
You don't know if you get it?
I haven't had.
That's the one. That's exactly the one we're talking about, Marianne. The one that nobody pays attention to, that
Right.
just comes in your mail and you're like, oh yeah, this thing, and throw it on the side.
So It's written to say that it will make Colorado courts stronger. And the people who are in favor of it, the guy who wrote it and stuff, he also had an article, but they're making them stronger by giving them more power. There's nothing that this initiative is going to produce that is different than what we already have, except money for them to have to pay another system. I don't think
Debbie, what this actually does do though, when it's out in the public, is this tells the public, hey, us guys, us good guys down at the state, we've realized there's a problem, because now you can't not see it because it's in the newspapers and stuff now finally. But what they're saying is, we've made this cool solution to this. We've got it under control. It's all fixed. Nothing to see here, folks. It's all taken care of.
just
And this
vote
is,
this in, just vote
yep,
it in.
and Debbie's, and it was written in a way that makes it very misleading. So you'd think like, oh, this is obviously something needed because I've been watching this in the news and it's needed and necessary. But then the solution that they come up with is absolutely just non-effective, and it's intentionally made to be ineffective and just make another branch so they can get some more cronies on the payroll under the other boards or a new legislative study committee or something like that. Just a way to keep themselves busy, again, doing busy work that doesn't go anywhere.
I'm trying to find the text of it right now, because this is what they also do is it's that's the other thing. I don't even, this is a finalized list of ballot amendments and propositions.
This is fun that you can't just find it by Googling it. This is the other thing. It's clear that they scrub the internet sometimes for certain things that might be sensitive for the government.
So this
At
is
least
not
you were able to find it, but it took a little working. This should be like the
Wow.
first thing on the Google search popping up at the top, right?
no, this is not the text of the actual, it's not this long. It's way not this long. Anyway, I'm gonna read go back to what Chris Forsyth wrote. He wrote 5 different articles. It got picked up by USA Today. He might have been a little bit late. He might have been a little bit late on getting these out there, because I started sharing the heck out of them the day the ballots were mailed out. So the lead time, we mailed ballots out on October 11th. So that's 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks before the election starts. So it's early voting, but people, so this is what it says. Opinion. Amendment H is a misleading step backward that would further erode the public's trust in Colorado courts. The amendment's creation of a private appeal process accessible only to judges would be a mistake. And he goes on, I mean, he's printing this at 1:30 in the morning on October 25th, is when the article came out, but he'd been writing about it. He was ready the day that the ballots were out, but he hadn't distributed and hadn't had too much exposure. But we continued to spread it around, and he got more and more exposure. The scales of justice would be weighted heavily in favor of troubled judges under Amendment H. Its hallmark is a secret appeal process focused on helping judges remain unaccountable. You see, Amendment H would allow judges to privately appeal discipline, but complainants whose complaints are initially dismissed, 97.2% of all complaints filed by the public are dismissed every year. They
And
wouldn't
get an appeal.
They wouldn't get an appeal.
Right.
Colorado desperately needs judicial reform. I and many others sincerely wish Amendment H would do what proponents allege. Unfortunately, it makes a flawed system even worse. Using figures provided in the annual reports of the Colorado Commission on Judicial Discipline for the last 40 years helps frame the analysis of Amendment H. See what I mean? People just go and they look at the blue book, it says yes, and they get online, and there's a lot of them that say yes, but these are the top hits on Amendment H if they bothered, if they looked at them. The current Discipline Commission would remain in place. It handled 99.8% of complaints filed by the public in private. Nothing changes with this.
Hold on one second, Debbie. There are 7,145 complaints on their record.
God.
That is a system that's working perfectly when there's 7,000 complaints.
You know what's missing there is when over the time range.
That's true, but still they have amassed 7,000 complaints. You're not doing it right
Oh,
somewhere.
it's over the last 40 years. This is what it is. He says,
Okay.
okay, so in 40 years, 77,000 into 40, that's still what? 40 into 7,000 is still 150, 160 complaints a year.
At
Right?
least, and these are the ones that come forward that they're actually documenting. How many just get silenced, right?
Yeah, these are the ones that, because of us, there are now forms in the courthouses. So you know what to do. But 97.2% dismissed, and only 0.2% ever make it to the public awareness. So the commission issued private discipline in 2.5% of complaints, 182 of them. What does it change the most? The private discipline process. A judge cannot currently appeal a finding of private discipline. The discipline commission can privately discipline a judge without interference. The amendment would change that by providing judges with multiple private appeals to help them avoid private discipline. So it just goes on. The Supreme Court's influence over judicial discipline would increase. At present, the Supreme Court's not involved in private discipline unless requested by a commission. So long as, okay, so what transparency and accountability would decrease. Amendment H provides for more actions to happen out of public view, confidential appeals of private discipline. At present, any Supreme Court opinions regarding judicial discipline are public. I need to note in here that right now, when you submit a complaint, you are not allowed to talk about it. It is against the law in Colorado to speak about a pending complaint to the courts. That stunned me when I found out.
Well, it also brings up the point, Debbie, that the whole thing is a First Amendment violation, right? And just the basis of the whole platform for it. The whole thing is an unconstitutional practice.
The purpose of the appeal process would be to decrease accountability. Only judges could appeal the Discipline Commission's determination regarding discipline. Complainants whose complaints are dismissed by the Discipline Commission would not have access to the appeal process. Number 4, an adjudicative board would become an additional step in the discipline process. He goes on, public confidence in the judicial system would decrease. So it passed by 73%. It was accepted by the Colorado electorate. I don't know what more to do. So Chris Forsyth wrote this. It was published in the Colorado Sun, if you want to look it up.
He has an article on MSN too. I know he had one there, and I think he had a couple others published in other big outlets.
He had 5 different ones published in multiple different places.
I think, Debbie, one point that we want to make is in the future for other activists, when you're getting ready for these things, try to start preparing for this like a couple months in advance of the election cycle so you can get ready, get a team together, because you'll want to go place flyers out there and flyer things to spread awareness, just to get your basic boots on the ground and get the organization part taken care of. Once you hit go time, then you can just concentrate on getting them out and doing it very quickly, because like what Debbie was saying, you have like 3 solid weeks where you'll be able to really make a dent. And if you're ready beforehand, you can probably do it.
But before they come out, before they come out and then people know that they're there, my suggestion is throw money at it and put up 10 billboards explaining what Amendment H doesn't do or what it will not accomplish. You know, how it is redundant, it's going to take even longer. So that's the other piece of,
Mm.
the outside the box thinking on how to make changes. So let's review what we have said. Okay. I know what I do. I have a banner that I stand and post, I tied to the bike rack at the front of the state capitol to make awareness that there's problems with our courts. I have a nonprofit and we are publishing. And so Heidi Ganal ran for governor of Colorado in 2022. We're stuck with Polis for another 2 years, right? Another 2 years. So he will have been in for 8 years at that point. I go to court. I study each case. I put together handouts for people. I try to make them attractive on color, trifolds,
Yeah.
or, we do, I personally, not affiliated with my nonprofit. I'm active personally as well. So I don't let my nonprofit pay for anything that has anything to do with electioneering, because that's political. The reason I don't believe that criticizing the judges is a political statement is because I have the actual case, the actual statements, the transcripts. So if we had more people who had enough money to pay for the transcripts for the parents to get, that is something my nonprofit can do. So that's what I'm doing, is like trying to have a nonprofit that supports the resources that keep parents. If you can see what they said in court, you now have the ability to challenge it, to talk about the unconstitutionality of it. You can throw it in their face. You can throw it into documents. And so we do have people who are really good writers. They cannot be attorneys. They cannot represent themselves as attorneys, but there is hope for pro se litigants. My organization does work with family court attorney that we're working with. He's pretty new. His name's Darren O'Connor here in Colorado. He knows about us. If he gets a case, he can bring it to us. And we have Byron L. Miller of Criminal Law Matters with his boss, Bill Peters, really supportive of change in the CPS side of it. They are criminal attorneys, and they are seeing the devastation being wrought upon these parents by the short turnaround for drug treatment. And also that we know that the treatment plans can be ignored. The progress on treatment plans can be ignored. Trying to think of what else we're doing, Nate. Can you think of what else?
Well, I think the thing that we brought up earlier about the court watchers is a huge thing. That's a huge factor you can bring to anytime you're in a court hearing where you are worried about having the laws thrown back on you, being slandered, any of that kind of stuff. Having more witnesses there helps, because when judges feel like they've got you all alone, that's when their predatory instincts are going to be at their highest. They will get shamed. They'll get shamed and balk away when there's a crowd that shows up. It's the same as fighting any other bully in a schoolyard or whatever. As long as they think they've got you pinned down and at their mercy, you're in a dangerous situation. But you can change that a lot by just appearing to them to not be somebody that's able to be pushed around as easy. Because like we were showing with the Robin Nacetta case, these people are predatory. They will profile the weak and separate them from the herd, just the way a predator would do on the African outback somewhere, attacking herd animals.
Well,
So
we've all tried the legislative approach and been really disappointed with it. It's tedious, takes a long time, and then at the very last minute, they can change a word or two. They can change the word must to may, and they totally take the teeth out of it. They drop the 10,000 fine for child family investigators for lying in the reports and on the witness stand to $1,000. They still make $10,000. They don't care about getting caught every 20 cases and having to pay $1,000 fine. They just don't care about it. Who's going to litigate it? So
right,
when
with
we
the
take a
attorney
case,
general. Oh, go ahead.
when we take a case, we're in it. We want a precedent set, but we also want a reputation that this is how it's done. I keep telling Nate, this is an experiment. This is we're assessing what's working, what's not working. We do podcasts. We have our website, considerationnonprofit.org. Yours is called, what is that website for you?
Just the Substack for paladinmedia.substack.com.
Paladin, Paladn.
Yep,
Without the I.
media.substack.com.
At Substack. So, we also work with Face Us, Families Against Court Embezzlement and Unethical Standards. They have joined our team as they're represented on the board. We are about to launch. Well, they're publishing a book called The Probate Trap that I've written a chapter in, and they're about to launch what you're doing, Mary Ann, which is doing the podcast across multiple media and multiple sites. And they've been doing the Face Us podcast. I did the Fourth Branch podcast. We're trying to retrieve our old podcasts off of Blog Talk. I had them all in the computer and my computer burned up. My son said it's lucky he didn't start the house on fire because it was sitting on a bookshelf. It's gone. That cannot find the memorandum of procedures online right now, but I keep looking. I have paper copies of that. It is still operable. That's the document we talked about last time that returns children to a parent with a history of sexual abuse against the child, as long as the parent is not in denial. And they've redefined the term parent in the Colorado laws to make anybody the judge wants to make a parent as party in the case. So, it's pretty scary and desperate looking out there, but I believe that there's hope. And I believe that we may be getting some support from people who are waking up to what's going on.
I would say the biggest thing that we need to push in the general population is critical thinking. And just seriously, like, fanaticism is one of this country's greatest issues to overcome right at this moment. People being open-minded enough to not believe that, especially with the Trump victory. I know a lot of the Trump fans want to see him come in and fix everything in the world. I was having this discussion with Debbie last night that even if Trump does come in and make systemic changes at the federal level, to work down into a bunch of these corrupt state systems is going to be difficult, because it is entrenched. It's really in there. So even if that would be the answer, then it's still going to take time to implement the whole thing. The country's in a major issue, a major crisis right now, crisis of legitimacy, because there is no rule of law at this point, right? And I was making the point, like, we've got a multi-tiered justice system with the unaccountable courts and government officials, the rich who are above the law, the working class who have to obey the law, and the prisoners who are just abused by the laws.
This is my little deaf dog. I want to say this. I think the people who have been victimized need to get on and share. Like, I think we should have an ex post where you victimize in family court and CPS, and see how many people will come forward and say, that happened to me. It happened to me. And then the next question would be, how have your children fared? How have your children done? Because I'm a global thinker. I want people to stand on the street corners at 12 o'clock on May 5th, whatever day we pick, all around the country, and stand with signs saying, I'm a victim of family court. I'm a victim of CPS. I'm a foster kid who never found her parents ever again. I'm a mother who has had her child completely destroyed and taken from me and ended up committing suicide. I want people to stand up and show the rest of the world the magnitude of this problem.
And it really falls on the population to do it, because, like, the oversight boards will just hide and cover up, and so will most of the mainstream media. We've been very lucky here the last year or two where it's started to actually break through into the main press around here. But like Debbie's saying, they still, even if it makes, like, in the Denver Post, they'll put it on a back page or something. It's not going to be the main news, and it won't be covered maybe in a video. It'll just be a written story or something to that end. So there's a lot of trouble getting the word out. So it's really important that the people do as much as they can on their own, especially in other states.
I have one more thing that I just remembered. So
Okay.
in Richard's case, Richard had been reaching out, he hasn't seen his children for 2 years and 9 months now. And in that interim, his 8-year-old son was raped by the mother's boyfriend, and they've live streamed it on a porn site. They got caught. The mother's in jail. The man, the perpetrator, his last name is Walter. He got $50,000 cash bond, and we have no idea, but I know it was probably some rich player who was watching the video, that he's in touch with, right? I know that he's out on the streets. However, Richard reached out to every source that he could think, and one of them was the peer review board for the psychologists. He had both of his court-appointed counselors believe in him, testified in his favor, and when the peer review board finally kicked in, they're appalled at what's happened to the dad, and have started an investigation. So usually the therapists don't have a recourse because it's so confidential. But in this case, we've busted it. It's so heinous. We've busted through. And how we happened to find it was the dad reaching out. So, DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, controls the CFIs. Even as Jamie Logan reported about in Colorado, her CFI was not even licensed, not even legitimate, and they're still allowing this person with 3 DUIs to be a factor, a heavily weighted factor in the custody battles. So don't stop trying. Keep anything we can get out to people. Go to Consideration Nonprofit. We're still building it. We're going to put as much in there to help people think outside the box, get the resources that they need. Ask your rich friends to make a donation. We could trigger it to individual cases even. So go for it. Let's stay on top of this and never give up. Never surrender. Fight,
Exactly.
fight.
And speak out.
And speak out. Don't be ashamed. It's not your fault. You are who you are. You grew up with what you had. You may have addictions. You may have weaknesses. You can get better. Your children deserve you in their lives. In 90% of the cases, 90% of the time.
And even when there's an issue of safety, the parents should still be involved. It should just be a supervised
That's
type
the
of
thing.
issue.
Yeah, they've been murderers get to see their children, but Richard doesn't. He's never had ever a crime. He's not addicted to anything. He's a good man. He was loving to his children. So yeah, those are the ones they take away.
Right. Totally. I agree with you. And these judges write these disgusting no contact orders for these parents, mothers and fathers. My no contact order was no contact via iPad, landline, iPhone, no holidays, and no Mother's Day.
That's
So
disgusting.
sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
God dealt with
that's
him.
awful.
God dealt with him. So,
Yep.
and
God doesn't get all of them, so it's up to us to get the
oh,
rest, right?
hey,
Or at least
you
give
know,
a little push.
if people pray hard enough, he will get them.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we need to start working so the
Right.
damage doesn't happen in the first place, because the prevention is the key element, right? If you can keep parents from getting into those situations where they're at the mercy of the courts, that's the best, because the courts are unaccountable and can't take care of themselves.
I also have a little business called divorce. Oh gosh,
Planners?
divorce planners. Divorce planners.
I'm not associated with divorce planners, just to be clear.
Divorceplanners.com. We've gotten into some heat with the practice of law, the unauthorized practice of law, which we don't do. We just fill out forms for parents and tell them don't go to family court.
Right.
We've kept a good 100 couples out of court. They
Good.
don't like that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so they
Tough
created
cookies.
a whole new class of lawyers, the PALs. They're like physician assistant lawyers.
Oh, no.
They don't have to pass the bar. Right?
Right.
That's what they did 2 years ago to address family court and make it less expensive.
No.
Yeah, they've got every answer in the book. They don't want to relinquish control over the families. That's
Mhm.
the other thing that they did in Colorado.
Unbelievable. But you know what? Those of us that have been through it believe it because we've suffered through it. But the neighbor down the street that hasn't gone through it has no clue.
No, and they
And
passed
that's who we need
judgment.
to appeal to. Go ahead, Debbie.
They passed judgment. People just jump to, like, the critical thinking's lacking, the ability to empathize and to listen is lacking. You
Mhm.
know, watch the
I,
podcast.
I, I think
Yeah.
we're coming to a time though where enough people are going to get hurt by this, where that
Yeah.
empathy is going to be converted more to just like you're watching it happen everywhere and you're next if you're not careful. And
Right.
it's like they hold you, they'll criminalize you for having a family.
Oh, yes.
That's the danger of it, is like there will be no other crime on the record other than you had a kid and you're unfortunately in front of a judge now fighting for them.
Mhm.
And
I mean,
that's
so many kids are being brought into this world without two parents to protect them. It's just,
Oh.
yeah, it's bad.
It is very
So
bad.
we're
But
praying for all of the parents, and we really appreciate you, Mary Ann. You know, we just got a lot of people working on this, and you've got it down to a science. You're doing a great job.
oh, thank you. I appreciate you. And I appreciate you both for coming on and spreading the word. And I will definitely spread the word with this podcast with all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
I will
Thank you.
take all your information and put it onto the podcast notes so everyone can get your contact info. But don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, other platforms I don't know about. And again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Nate Munro and Debbie Carroll. I'm so glad you came on to tell us all about this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Definitely.